So guys, I saw this really interesting story yesterday I want to quickly touch on, and then we'll get to some Arch Manning stuff and some college football recruiting stuff. But first, DJ Wagner, the number one overall basketball player in the class of 2023 from New Jersey. You take a look at this story. Louisville basketball hires Milt Wagner, grandfather of top 2023 recruit DJ Wagner, for some sort of administrative position. This is a tale as old as time, with these schools hiring relatives of these five-star players, and this is another situation like it. Now, personally, I would love to see Louisville land the number one overall player. Apparently, it was looking like Kentucky was going to get him early on, but now Louisville, with the support of hiring his grandfather, is the clear betting favorite to land the number one overall player. I just thought it was interesting. Could you imagine that happening with like Arch Manning or someone in football? It's happened before, but it's just crazy. The number one overall player probably going to Louisville, in part to his father getting an administrative job with Louisville University. Very interesting, and it sucks for Kentucky, but Kentucky gets like 100 5-stars. They can live with missing one. And Louisville, I think that'd be the first time Louisville ever has gotten the number one overall player. So that is interesting. But guys, getting to some big college football recruiting news. The quarterback dominoes are falling. We've got Alabama getting their quarterback, getting their guy, Eli Holstein from Louisiana, the number 54 overall player, the number 8 overall quarterback. They do pull him out of Louisiana, out of LSU country. LSU right now is in on Dante Moore, although a lot of teams are in on Dante Moore. He's a 5-star quarterback, but this is a really good get for Alabama. But guys, when it comes to the number one overall recruit, Arch Manning, who currently has a perfect rating of 1,000, you're looking at a 2-team race between the University of Texas and Georgia. And right now, from what I hear, it's looking like he is heavily leaning towards going to Texas. He's got the Manning bloodline. This decision, if he does go to Texas, it will be a little bit surprising. But you have to imagine Texas is selling Arch Manning on, Quinn Ewers possibly being a first-round pick, a top 10 pick in the 2024 draft. He could come right in as a true sophomore, start for 2 years. Also, Texas, they're getting real desperate because they know the schedule is only going to get tougher when they move to the SEC. So they've got their NIL collectives out in full force for the class of 2023. They've already offered Arch Manning a $15 million NIL deal. Not that it really matters considering Arch Manning's bloodlines and his family. He really doesn't need money, but this would be such a huge recruiting win for Steve Sarkisian. And then the current number 2 overall team in this race is Georgia. And that really doesn't make much sense to me. I mean, I don't know which quarterbacks Georgia has really developed from an NFL perspective recently, but I know he's going to give Georgia a legitimate chance. And you just take a look around the country, at this point, a lot of these QBs are already committed. USC already has their quarterback. Ohio State has a 2024 quarterback that's going to, really not attract any sort of top 2023 quarterbacks from going there. They also signed a top 2022 quarterback. So overall, guys, not a lot of QB spots open with Arch Manning. Also, we were hearing a bit about Virginia due to some family relatives Arch Manning has there, maybe his girlfriend or something, I don't remember exactly, but it's looking like it's a 2-team race, and it's looking like Texas, and it does, the timeline, when you look at the QB room, if Texas goes Quinn Ewers this year, Quinn Ewers next year, he goes off to the NFL, then you have Arch Manning for 2 years. The timeline does line up, and it could be looking like Arch Manning trending towards Texas, although you can't count out Georgia. But from an NFL standpoint, it would be surprising if he did go to Georgia. At least Steve Sarkisian has. He's developed quarterbacks before. You take a look at his time at Alabama. He's kind of known as a QB guy. He gets Quinn Ewers. We'll see how they do this year. This is such a major year for Texas University. I was just thinking about this. Texas has to beat Oklahoma this year. first-year head coach, Lincoln Riley's gone for Oklahoma. You got to win that game. You got to win that game, and you would love to make a New Year's Six Bowl. Texas needs this year so bad. Bijan Robinson's final year. You've got Xavier Worthy. You've got Quinn Ewers. You're going to the SEC in a few years. Your schedule is only going to get harder. You win these games. You use the NIL collectives. You can really, really become a really good program again. The weird thing with Texas, everyone compares Texas and Nebraska, but the difference is Texas still recruits well. I mean, Nebraska's problem is so much more severe than Texas because at least Texas still brings in elite talent. Nebraska doesn't. A lot of the talent that was located in the middle of the United States back in the 80s and 90s, it's dried up. Now all the talent's in Georgia, all the talent's in Texas, all the talent's in Florida, all the talent's in California. So Nebraska has way more issues than Texas. Both of them have been down, recently, but Texas has the ability because they still recruit at a top 10 level to get back a lot quicker. And you get Quinn Ewers in the portal from Ohio State. Maybe you get Arch Manning. You've already got a plethora of skill position players just from the state of Texas alone. This would be a huge recruiting win for them. Another prospect I want to talk about real quickly, Caleb Downs. This kid is an absolute superstar safety. He's a top 10 player. I don't know how they have him as the 11th overall player. I'd probably have him inside my top 5. This kid from the state of Georgia, he's got a top 3 right now of Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia going into his official visits. He wants to commit during the summer. And I know a lot of Ohio State fans are optimistic. It would be unbelievable if Ohio State was somehow able to pull this kid out of the South. I just can't see Georgia letting this kid go. I think they're going to get a big NIL deal together. I don't know if this kid necessarily is an NIL type recruit, but it's tough to pass up a lot of money. And also, this kid apparently is like 40 minutes from Georgia's campus. Georgia just put 5 defensive players into the NFL as first-round picks. So if you're Caleb Downs, you're 40 minutes from the campus. That's your home. Very tough pull for Ohio State. Still a tough pull for Alabama. Right now, it's looking like the top 3. Ohio State number 1, Alabama number 2, Georgia number 3. But again, it's all very close. It's very fluid. I see this kid eventually staying home, even though Ohio State does lead for him right now. That would be a crazy pull by the Buckeyes. But again, if I had to make a prediction on where he's going to go, Georgia has just done such an amazing job when it comes to the defense. I see him eventually staying home. Maybe he goes to Alabama. It's just a tough pull for a program in the North to get a kid from Georgia, especially a kid that talented. The next guy I want to talk about, Noah Rogers. This is disrespectful. I mean, Noah Rogers being ranked as the 60th overall player, the 11th overall wide receiver. I think Noah Rogers is minimum a top 3 wide receiver in the country. He's a top 20 player in the country. He's a clear 5-star. Let's hope he shows out at some of these camps because this kid, when I watch him, I see Chris Godwin 2.0. That's what I see with Noah Rogers, the number 1 overall player in North Carolina. He will be announcing his commitment very soon to the Ohio State University. So there's some great news right there. Noah Rogers, Brian Hartline gets another superstar receiver. And this kid, you look at him, 60th overall, that's a good ranking, but he's actually severely underrated. They're going to be moving him up, hopefully to 5-star range. I mean, you take a look at this kid, everyone says how unbelievably talented he is. He's 6'2" right now. I still think he's got an inch to grow. I think he'll be 6'3" by the time he steps on Ohio State's campus. This is a big-bodied stud receiver that should be a Buckeye. NC State, the number 2 school in this recruitment. There was some early momentum for NC State, but Brian Hartline, the superstar wide receiver coach for Ohio State, has zeroed in on this guy, and he's getting him. He's getting Noah Rogers. Noah Rogers will be a Buckeye. Now, this kid, the offensive tackle from New Jersey, Chase Bicentis, this is a complete NIL kid. So, very interesting story here. Ohio State was recruiting him. He leaves the Buckeyes out of his top 6 because Ohio State doesn't weaponize NIL and give kids NIL deals just to come to their school. I would guess Texas A&M, Michigan State are going to be teams that are in on this kid. He is an offensive tackle ranked 58th overall, the number 5 offensive tackle in the class. This kid's a stud player, and he's going to want a big NIL deal, so this will be a very interesting recruitment to follow. But guys, the one kid that's really interesting when it comes to this class, Dante Moore. Dante Moore from the state of Michigan. He's a top 10 player. He's a future franchise quarterback, athletic, everything you want in a future stud quarterback, leader of a program, potential top 10 overall pick. And there are a lot of schools in on him. You're talking about in-state Michigan. You're talking about Notre Dame, who's the perceived leader for him. How about Notre Dame's 2023 class right now? It's amazing. Notre Dame's done such a great job on the recruiting trail, landing, stable, solid, stud, 4-star players to go along with their 5-star pass rusher in that class. If they get more, that is an absolute steal. But Moore could be the type of kid that wants NIL, which would really hinder Michigan and Notre Dame's chances, and it would really boost the chances of programs like LSU, like Oregon, like Texas A&M, who we just recently visited. We'll have to see what Texas A&M does when it comes to their QB in the class of 2023. But this is a very fascinating recruitment. It's just weird, like with LSU. And I can't be the only one that thinks Brian Kelly is just not the correct fit for a program like LSU this day and age with how prevalent NIL booster cheating is in college football. It's just, it's water and oil with Brian Kelly and LSU. There's no way, like originally when Brian Kelly was hired by LSU, I was like, I put the over-under on this 3.5 years before he's out. I'm actually going to drop that to 2.5 years. Brian Kelly does not fit LSU at all. And I think it's a disaster of a hire, and it just makes no sense to me. But I just wanted to talk about that. Another quick thing, Penn State football tweeted this out. It says, picture this, you're selecting which game to make the whiteout. What matters to you most? And many of the fans voted that the night game matters to them the most. So this comes with speculation that the Ohio State-Penn State, the annual whiteout game for Penn State, is actually going to be a big noon game on Fox, which would be horrible for Penn State, really good for Ohio State. You want to avoid the whiteout, and Penn State may actually make their whiteout game against Michigan State, although I know some people are saying, the Michigan State game's in November. You can't have night Big Ten games in November. So I don't know what Penn State is going to do. They might just have the whiteout game, during the noon window if they have to face Ohio State at noon. Big noon is a travesty. It's horrible. I hate it. It is terrible for the sport. I wish Ohio State would just say we refuse to participate in Big Noon. I know they can't do that because of the TV contracts, but Big Noon is terrible. But this is a situation where Big Noon would help Ohio State. You would much rather face Penn State at noon than 8 o'clock. If you guys remember back in 2020, Ohio State also dodged that whiteout with the no fans when they went to Penn State back in October of 2020. They were able to dodge that as well. I think that was on Halloween night. If you're Penn State, you got to be really pissed about it. I will say, I think Penn State really botched last year having their whiteout game against Auburn instead of Michigan. I understand Auburn is this big SEC team, but when I saw that they had planned their whiteout game against Auburn and not Michigan, I was like, what a huge missed opportunity. You are going against Michigan every single year on the recruiting trail. Beating them is more important than beating Auburn. You got to use all your resources. When the Ohio State game is on the road, you want a whiteout game, it should be against Michigan, but they chose Auburn. They end up beating Auburn, and they ended up losing to Michigan at home. I thought that was a really dumb decision by their administration to pick their whiteout game against Auburn. They're an okay program, but beating Michigan is, if you're Penn State, beating Michigan is so much more important than beating Auburn. So much more. On the recruiting trail, national perception, everything. It is literally, when you look at the Big Ten hierarchy, before Michigan made the playoff this year, it was Ohio State the clear number 1, and then either Michigan State or Michigan at 2 and 3. Now Michigan is clearly number 2 because they made the playoff. And, they beat Ohio State, things like that. Ohio State is still number 1, no doubt. But I'm just saying, if you're Penn State, I did not understand the thought process of their administration to make their whiteout game against Auburn, and it's like, ooh, it's this big SEC team. They're not even that big of an SEC team. Auburn, they're mediocre. They've been mediocre for several years now, and they're actually a dumpster fire now. And, I believe Penn State has that home and home with Auburn still, so they have to travel. Yeah, they do. This year, Penn State in a non-conference game has to travel to Auburn. That's going to be a big game for Big Ten perception. We would love to see Penn State win that game, of course. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.